We were four guys coming back from a bonfire on a stretch of private land that people used without asking. The fire had burned low by the time we left, and the night carried that heavy smell of smoke and damp leaves that sticks to clothes. Nobody wanted to take the long paved road back, so we turned onto a logging road that cut straight through the timber. It was narrow, uneven, and barely visible beyond the reach of the headlights. The gravel was packed hard, and the dust hung low behind the truck like fog. The woods closed in fast. Pines leaned over the road, and brush pressed tight to both sides, close enough that the mirrors skimmed leaves. The darkness past the headlights felt solid, like a wall. The only sounds were the engine, the rattle of loose tools in the bed, and the crunch of tires. We all felt it was a mistake, but nobody said anything. The road saved time, and we wanted to be home. About a mile in, something struck the side of the truck. It was not the sound of a rock kicked up by a tire. It landed higher, flat and heavy, with a dull thud that traveled through the door panel. The truck drifted slightly before the driver corrected. The second impact came almost right after, closer to the rear, the same weight and shape. Both hits felt deliberate. The truck rolled to a stop without discussion. The engine idled rough. The lights stayed on. The woods swallowed everything past them. When we stepped out, the air felt colder. The smell of sap was sharp. Dust coated the doors from the road, and against that dust were marks that had not been there seconds earlier. They were full handprints pressed hard, not smeared, one on the front door and one behind it. The palms were wide. The finger marks were long and deep, spaced wrong for any of us. The tips dragged slightly, like claws had caught and pulled before lifting away. I stood close enough to see the texture where the dust had been cleared. The metal underneath was clean and cool. No scratches, no dents, just pressure. The silence pressed in. Somewhere off to the right, deeper in the trees, branches shifted. It did not sound like steps on the ground. It sounded like weight moving higher up, a slow transfer from limb to limb, wood flexing under mass. The sound tracked us as we moved along the side of the truck, staying just beyond the beam of the lights. It kept pace without rushing, always matching position. My chest tightened. Every instinct said to run, but none of us moved fast. We knew better than to break into noise or chaos. The forest felt alert, like it was listening. The ground around us showed no clear tracks. The road surface was too hard, the dust too thin. Whatever had touched the truck had done it without stepping onto the open road. The branches shifted again, closer now, and I could hear small snaps, timed to our movements, not random. Something large was moving through brush that would have slowed a person, yet it kept up without effort. We climbed back into the truck as one, doors shutting quietly but fast. The engine revved higher than normal, and the tires spun before catching. Gravel sprayed into the dark. As we moved, the sound followed. Branches snapped in a steady rhythm that matched our speed, not chasing, not falling behind. The noise stayed off to the side, never breaking into the open. The headlights caught flashes of bark and leaves, nothing solid. The road bent slightly, and the snapping moved with it. The pacing continued for nearly a mile. The truck strained over ruts, and still the sound stayed even. Whatever was there did not tire. It did not stumble. It moved with purpose. Then, without warning, it stopped. The snapping ended mid-motion, like a switch thrown. The woods went still. No retreat. No crash of something leaving. Just absence. We did not slow down until the road met pavement. Nobody looked back. The rest of the drive passed without sound. Morning brought light and distance, but it did not bring relief. I went back to the truck alone to look. The dust from the night before had settled unevenly, disturbed by wind and traffic. The handprints were gone. No marks. No smears. Nothing to prove they had ever been there. I knew where they had been, and I stared at those spots longer than I should have, trying to see what was no longer visible. Over the next few days, I kept replaying details, lining them up against what made sense. The size, the height of the impacts, the strength needed to leave clear prints without denting steel, the movement through trees instead of across the road, the way it paced the truck instead of charging it. Bears live in that area. Big ones. A standing bear can reach the height of a truck door with ease. Their forepaws can strike with enough force to shake metal without tearing it. In dust, a bear's paw can leave marks that look like long fingers, especially when claws drag. The sound of weight shifting through branches fits an animal that climbs or pushes through brush rather than walking upright. A bear can run alongside a truck on rough ground longer than most people expect, especially on a straight stretch where it does not need to sprint. The behavior fit too. Bears test. They swat. They investigate noise and light. They keep pace to assess without committing. When they decide against it, they stop without drama. What stayed with me was the control, the timing, the choice to remain just out of sight. That is what made it feel wrong in the moment. Fear fills gaps faster than reason can. In the dark, scale becomes distorted. Dust turns into evidence of something else. None of us talk about that night anymore. There is no argument over what it was. We do not need one. Understanding did not make it smaller. It only made it real. We learned how thin the barrier is between a road and the life that presses up against it. How easily sound and shadow can turn familiarity into threat. We still go to bonfires. We still drive back late. But we take the long way now, the paved road with open shoulders and clear lines. Logging roads save time. They also belong to things that move better in the dark than we ever will. I was driving home from a warehouse shift just after midnight, the kind of shift that leaves your arms buzzing and your thoughts flattened. My hands smelled like cardboard, dust, and diesel fuel, no matter how many times I wiped them on my jeans. The cab of my car held the heat from the day, even with the windows cracked. July did not cool off at night where I lived. It just changed its tone. I had worked 10 hours loading pallets, counting boxes, moving fast under fluorescent lights that never dimmed. By the time I pulled out of the lot, my eyes felt dry and heavy, and the road ahead looked softer than it should have, like it was being viewed through a thin layer of grease. I focused on staying alert. No music, no phone calls, just the sound of tires and the low hum of the engine. About 15 minutes into the drive, Google Maps chimed and rerouted me. A red warning appeared about an accident ahead. I did not question it. I never did. The app had saved me time before. I followed the blue line as it slid off the main road and onto something thinner. The new road narrowed almost immediately. 2 lanes with no shoulder to speak of, just cracked asphalt dropping into dirt. On my right, an irrigation canal ran parallel to the road, dark water moving fast enough to catch the light. On my left, flat fields stretched out, empty and dry, broken only by the occasional fence post. There were no streetlights, no houses, no reflectors except for the faded center line. The only sound inside the car was the rush of air through the windows and the steady movement of water outside. It felt quieter than it should have been, like the world had pulled back a few steps. I adjusted my grip on the wheel and kept my speed steady. I did not want to hit anything on a road like that. 10 minutes passed, maybe more. Time had a way of thinning out when I was tired. My headlights swept over the pavement, then the dirt, then the canal wall, over and over, a slow rhythm. That was when I saw him. He stood on the right side of the road, close to where the asphalt ended. He faced away from traffic, toward the canal. He was not moving. No pacing. No shifting his weight. Just standing there. There was no car pulled over. No hazard lights. No phone glow in his hands. Nothing to explain why someone would be there at that hour. The sight of him tightened something in my chest, the instinctive reaction you get before your mind catches up. As I got closer, more details came into view. He was wearing a long coat that reached past his knees. The fabric looked thick, heavy enough to hold its shape. Under it, dark pants. Boots that caught the edge of my headlights and reflected back dull and scuffed. His posture was straight, shoulders slightly hunched forward, like he was leaning into the night air. The wrongness of the clothes hit me hard. It was still over 90 degrees, even that late. I could feel sweat on my back just sitting in the car. The idea of wearing a coat like that made my skin itch. I told myself there were explanations. Some people dressed strangely. Some people worked night jobs that required protective gear. The canal ran through farmland. Maybe he was checking something. Maybe he was waiting for a ride. I stayed in my lane and did not slow down. The closer I got, the more I focused on the road ahead, on the line, on the edge of the pavement. I did not want to stare. I did not want to acknowledge him more than necessary. Right as my car came level with him, he turned his head. He did not turn his body. His shoulders stayed square to the canal. Only his head rotated, slow and deliberate, until his face slipped into the edge of my vision. I did not look directly at him. I did not need to. The angle of his face was off. The proportions did not sit right. His features looked stretched, not distorted in a dramatic way, but subtly wrong, like skin pulled too tight over bone. His eyes were open too wide, catching the light unevenly. His mouth hung slightly open, lips dry and pale. The expression was blank, not aggressive, not afraid. It looked like concentration, like effort. The moment lasted less than a second. My car moved past him, and he vanished from my side window. My heart started pounding, a hard, fast rhythm that I could feel in my throat. My hands tightened on the wheel without me telling them to. I checked the rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty. The headlights cut cleanly across the asphalt and into darkness. There was no figure shrinking into the distance. No shape at the edge of the road. Nothing. I did not hit the brakes. I did not slow. I did not look again. I kept my eyes forward and stayed exactly where I was in the lane. My breathing turned shallow, quick, and I forced it to slow down. I told myself that darkness swallowed details, that the angle mattered, that my lights had passed him, and he was simply out of view. The canal continued beside me, the sound of water unchanged. The road curved slightly, then straightened. Every shadow along the shoulder looked like it could turn into a person if I let my focus slip. I did not let it. After several more minutes, the road widened. Reflective markers appeared. The canal veered away, and distant lights crept back into the world. When I finally merged onto the highway, the familiar rush of traffic noise felt almost comforting. Google Maps recalculated. The blue line snapped back to my usual route. The detour vanished. There was no mention of the side road I had just driven. No warning. No explanation. It was as if it had never been there. I drove the rest of the way home on autopilot. I parked, sat in the car for a moment, and waited for my pulse to settle. Inside, I showered and scrubbed my hands until the smell faded. I slept hard and without dreams. In the morning, the memory did not fade the way most late-night scares did. It stayed sharp. The coat, the way his head moved without the rest of him following. The empty mirror. I opened my laptop and checked the local news, expecting to see something that would slot the experience into place. There was no report of an accident, no lane closure, no mention of a detour anywhere near my route. Traffic records showed nothing out of the ordinary for that night. I kept digging. County updates. Transportation notices. Nothing. Later that afternoon, I searched the map manually. I found the narrow road by following the canal's path. It existed. It was real. Satellite images showed the same thin strip of asphalt, the same water running beside it. But it was not listed as a recommended route. It did not appear in recent traffic data. It was the kind of road an algorithm might use temporarily if it pulled from outdated information. That was when another article caught my attention, buried a few pages deep. A short piece about a man found earlier that week along an irrigation canal several miles from where I had been driving. He had suffered severe heat exhaustion and dehydration. He had been reported missing from a nearby agricultural supply yard, where he worked nights maintaining pumps and gates. According to the report, he wore heavy protective clothing designed to prevent chemical exposure. He had wandered away from his work site sometime after midnight. The article mentioned disorientation, confusion, a tendency to fixate on water without understanding how to reach it safely. It described how heat stress could affect posture, movement, even facial muscles, making expressions appear strained or unnatural. I sat back and read it again. The location was not exact, but it lined up enough to settle something in me. The man I had seen had likely been real, standing there in a state where his body kept going, but his awareness lagged behind. The coat made sense. The canal explained his focus. The way he turned his head without turning his body fit with someone conserving energy, moving only what was necessary. As for the mirror, I understood that too. Darkness swallowed him once my headlights passed. My fear had filled in the rest. The detour had probably been a temporary routing error, corrected once traffic data refreshed. The system erased it because it was never meant to be permanent. Nothing supernatural had happened. No rules had been broken. I had crossed paths with a person at the edge of his limits, and my exhausted mind had done the rest. That explanation should have put it to rest. In a way, it did, but I still avoid that road. I still keep my maps updated. And every time I drive home from a late shift, I stay on the highway, where the lights are steady and the shoulder is wide enough that no one has to stand so close to passing cars, waiting to be seen. The night felt ordinary in a way that only arguments can make things feel ordinary. Windows down because the air inside the car had gone stale. The road empty, a thin ribbon of asphalt cutting through scrub and fields. No houses close enough to throw light. No traffic to interrupt the rhythm of the tires. The engine held a steady note. The argument had already worn itself thin, the kind that circles the same points until they lose meaning. I kept my eyes on the road. My hand stayed fixed on the wheel. My chest felt tight from holding things back. The smell of dry grass drifted in through the open windows. Somewhere far off, an irrigation pump thumped in a slow, patient way. The sky was clear, dark, heavy with stars. Headlights carved a tunnel through the night, showing gravel at the shoulder and the pale edges of weeds. I remember thinking how quiet everything was, how exposed the car felt with the windows open and nothing around us. The argument wasn't loud anymore. It had turned cold, the kind where each person pulls inward, measuring distance, deciding what not to say. The road dipped slightly, then leveled out. The speedometer sat just under 50. I could feel the vibration of the steering wheel through my palms. I could feel the tension in my jaw. That was when movement entered the edge of my vision. At first, it registered as a shadow keeping pace with the car. Not ahead, not behind, beside us. My eyes flicked left, then forward again. The shape stayed there, long vertical, moving fast enough that it matched our speed for a few seconds. Too fast to be someone walking, too steady to be a loose shadow from the headlights. I looked again. It ran along the shoulder, just beyond the white line. Its outline rose and fell with a controlled rhythm. Arms moved close to the body. Legs extended fully, eating ground with each stride. The posture was wrong for an animal. No low head, no uneven gait. It stayed upright, balanced, efficient. The distance between us never changed. The car and the runner held the same pace, side by side. Close enough that I could see the fabric of a shirt pulled tight across a back. Close enough to notice how the head stayed level despite the speed. There was no reflective gear, no light, just a dark figure outlined by our headlights. My stomach dropped. My foot pressed the accelerator without conscious thought. The engine responded. The speed climbed. The figure stayed with us for another second, then fell back, slipping into darkness as the road straightened and the beam of the headlights moved ahead. I felt her shift beside me. Her body went rigid. Her hand lifted slightly, then dropped back to her lap. Her breathing changed. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. The reaction was enough. Whatever that was, it wasn't only in my head. The road stayed empty. The night closed back in. No more movement at the edge of the light. No sound beyond the engine and the wind through the open windows. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sweat broke along my spine despite the cool air. I kept driving. I didn't slow down. I didn't speed up more. I focused on the center of the lane, on keeping the car steady. The argument evaporated, replaced by a thick silence that felt heavier than the words had been. My thoughts scattered, trying to make sense of what I had seen without giving it more weight than it deserved. I told myself it was a runner, a local training at night to avoid the heat. Someone fit enough to sprint alongside a car for a short stretch. Someone who knew the road well enough to move without a light. The explanation fit if I forced it to. It fit better than anything else. Still, the image stuck. The way it matched our speed so easily. The way it appeared without warning. The way it disappeared just as cleanly. We drove the rest of the way without changing anything. No glance toward the shoulder. No checking the mirrors more than usual. The quiet returned, but it wasn't the same quiet from before. It had edges now. It pressed in from all sides. Later that night, lying awake, the scene replayed with uncomfortable clarity. The timing bothered me more than the shape. It happened at the exact moment when the argument had reached a point of no return. When something between us had shifted, even if neither of us wanted to admit it yet. The thought lodged itself deep and stayed there. In the days that followed, I paid more attention to the road when I drove it alone. I noticed how straight the stretch was, how flat, how wide the shoulder ran before dropping into a shallow ditch. I noticed tire marks from farm equipment, footprints pressed into soft dirt after rain. I looked for signs of someone running there regularly. A week later, early in the morning, I saw him. He moved the same way, upright, efficient, long strides. He wore running shoes and a dark shirt. No reflective vest, no light. He ran against traffic, hugging the shoulder, eyes fixed ahead. He didn't look at my car as I passed. He didn't react at all. The sight brought a strange mix of relief and unease. Relief because it gave the memory a shape that made sense. Unease because it confirmed how close we had been to something we didn't expect, something that had slipped into our night without warning. I did the math without meaning to. Our speed that night, his likely pace, the slight downhill stretch where gravity would have helped him surge forward, the fact that headlights flatten depth and distort distance, the way the brain fills gaps when tension is already high. It all lined up. I never mentioned seeing the runner later. Neither did she bring up that night again. The silence around it hardened into something permanent. It became another thing we carried separately, another place where our experiences overlapped without connecting. A month later, the breakup felt inevitable. Not dramatic, not explosive, just a quiet acknowledgement that whatever safety we once felt with each other had thinned out. Trust isn't only about faithfulness or honesty. It's also about believing that when something unexpected enters your life, you can face it together without turning away. That night on the road stayed with me because it stripped away the illusion that we were solid. The runner didn't cause the break. He didn't symbolize anything mystical or ominous. He was just a person pushing their limits on a quiet road at night. What lingered was how quickly we both shut down afterward, how neither of us reached for the other, how the shared fear didn't pull us closer. It drew a line instead. Sometimes, when I drive that stretch with the windows down, I think about how easily the mind assigns meaning to moments that happen during emotional stress, how danger feels larger when you're already unsteady, how the brain looks for patterns even when the explanation is simple. I know now what ran beside the car. I know how it was possible. I know why it felt wrong in the moment and harmless later. What still unsettles me is not the memory of a figure keeping pace in the dark, but the realization that when it happened, we were already alone, sitting inches apart, moving forward without the same sense of direction or safety. I was running solo that night, a long haul with no schedule pressure but a tight delivery window at the end. The cab felt smaller than usual, the kind of closed-in quiet that happens after midnight when the road stretches straight and empty for miles. I kept the CB radio on low, just enough to hear if someone warned about a wreck or a speed trap. Most of the time it was nothing but static and distant chatter bleeding in and out, voices too far away to catch, like listening through a wall. The trailer behind me was light. I could feel it every time the road dipped. Empty miles do that to your head. You start noticing small things. The way the steering wheel vibrated differently on older pavement. The smell of diesel and dust baked into the seat. The hum of the engine settling into a steady rhythm that almost felt like breathing. I had checked my mirrors more than usual, not because I expected trouble, but because I was alone and alert in that way drivers get when there is nothing else to focus on. The voice came through without warning, cutting cleanly through the static. It said my full name. First, middle, last. Not shouted, not rushed. Calm, like it belonged there. My foot eased off the throttle without me thinking about it. My hands tightened on the wheel. No one should have known my name over the radio. Drivers use handles or company names if they use anything at all. Hearing my name like that felt wrong in a way I had trouble defining. It was personal in a space that should have stayed anonymous. The radio stayed quiet after that, like nothing had happened. I waited for more, listening so hard my ears rang. The road stayed empty. No headlights behind me. No brake lights ahead. Just reflective signs sliding past, and the dashed center line ticking by under the bumper. I told myself it was a coincidence. A wrong channel. Someone messing around. The CB is full of nonsense late at night. I brought my speed back up and tried to settle into the drive again, but my focus was gone. My eyes kept drifting to the mirrors, especially the one that showed the side of the trailer. The metal skin reflected my own lights back at me, dull and gray, nothing moving. After a few miles, the voice came back. Clear again. It told me to check my trailer. The words landed heavy. Not urgent, not threatening, just stated, like an instruction. I felt a cold weight in my stomach. Checking the trailer meant pulling over, getting out, breaking the rhythm of motion that felt like the only thing keeping me safe. There were no rest areas nearby. The shoulder was narrow, sloping into dark grass. This stretch of road cut through nothing but open land and low trees. I kept driving. The radio crackled, then the voice reacted. It sounded pleased. It said it was good that I was not stopping and that I should keep going. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a prank. Whoever it was did not want me to pull over. That detail mattered. My thoughts raced through possibilities I did not want to name. Someone following me. Someone who had been watching at a truck stop earlier. Someone who knew what I was hauling, or thought they did. I shut the radio off. The silence after was loud, like stepping out of a factory floor into open air. I did not turn it back on. I did not change speed. I focused on the road and kept moving. Every mile after that felt stretched. I checked the mirrors constantly, scanning for shapes that did not belong. The road stayed empty, but that did not help. The idea that someone could be out there without showing themselves sat in my chest and pressed with every breath. I replayed the night leading up to it, searching for where my name could have slipped. The fuel stop earlier, where my company logo was clear on the door and my paperwork sat on the dash while I paid inside. Anyone walking by could have seen the bill of lading with my name printed at the top. At the weigh station, where I handed over documents and stood waiting while other drivers milled around. Names are not secrets in this job. You just forget how exposed you are until something reminds you. Still, knowing that did not calm me. The voice had sounded too confident, too close. I did not stop until I reached the yard at the end of the run. Dawn was starting to thin the darkness, turning the sky a flat gray. The gate slid open and I rolled inside, parking where they had told me. Only then did I step out of the cab. The trailer seal was intact. No scratches on the doors. No signs of tampering. I broke the seal and swung the doors open, half expecting something to fall out or prove the voice right. The trailer was empty. It was supposed to be. That was the part that hit me hardest. I had been assigned an empty repositioning run. No cargo. No reason for anyone to care what was inside. Seeing the bare metal floor and scuffed walls should have been reassuring. Instead, it raised more questions. I stood there longer than necessary, listening to the yard wake up around me. Forklifts started moving in the distance. A dispatcher walked by without looking my way. Life continued, indifferent. Later that morning, after sleep that barely counted, I started making calls. I asked about recent thefts, about drivers being targeted on that route. I did not lead with the radio call. I just listened. It turned out there had been a string of attempted robberies along that stretch of highway. Not trucks being forced off the road, but drivers being tricked into stopping. Someone would get their attention, make them think there was a mechanical issue, or that their trailer door was open. Once the driver stepped out, accomplices would move in from the dark. Most of the time, they went after loaded trailers. Sometimes they just took whatever they could grab from the cab. The radio was part of it. They used high-powered CBs and scanners to listen in at truck stops and weigh stations, picking up names, routes, details. They learned which trucks were running solo and which ones were light. The goal was not always the cargo. Sometimes it was just the driver, isolated and tired. That explained the laughter. That explained why they did not want me to stop. An empty trailer meant no payout. No reason to risk exposure. Better to let me go and wait for the next target who might be carrying something worth the effort. The name still bothered me. Hearing it spoken like that had crossed a line that stayed with me. It reminded me how thin the barrier is between routine and danger, how quickly familiarity can be used against you. I filed a report. I gave times, locations, frequencies. The officer nodded like he had heard versions of it before. He told me I did the right thing by not stopping, by keeping control of the situation and limiting my exposure. He said most drivers who got hurt did so because they trusted the wrong cue. I believe him. I think about that night every time I roll past an empty stretch with the radio on low. I still use it. It is part of the job, but my name never goes on the dash anymore. Paperwork stays out of sight. I do not answer voices that know too much. When I picture the trailer now, I see it exactly as it was that morning, clean and empty, doors wide open under a pale sky. Nothing taken, nothing damaged. The threat had passed without leaving a mark I could point to. That almost makes it worse. Because it means if I had pulled over, if I had listened, the story would have ended very differently. The concert let out late, the kind of late where the parking lot lights buzz and everyone moves too fast because the adrenaline has nowhere to go. 3 of us piled into my car, still buzzing, ears ringing, bodies warm from the crowd. The road out of the city was open and dry, a long stretch of highway that cut through industrial land and then farmland. The music stayed loud because silence would have made the night collapse on itself. Headlights streamed past in both directions. Everything felt normal in that loose, careless way that comes after something exciting ends. Traffic thinned as the city lights dropped behind us. The highway widened, then narrowed again. Reflective signs flashed by. I remember the smell of hot brakes and spilled beer on someone's sleeve. My hands rested light on the wheel, relaxed. The car felt steady. The music thumped through the speakers, bass pushing against my ribs. The first time the car passed us, I barely registered it. A dark sedan came up fast on the left, engine high, then slid ahead and cut back into our lane. Nothing unusual. People drove like that all the time on this road. I adjusted my speed without thinking and stayed where I was. A few minutes later, the same car came up again. I noticed because of a dull scrape along its rear bumper that caught my headlights just right. It passed us the same way, fast, then slowed just enough before pulling ahead. I remember feeling a small flicker of irritation, the kind that comes and goes without forming a thought. I let it go. The third pass made me sit up straighter. The sedan came from behind again, identical approach, identical move. As it slid by, I glanced over. The driver faced forward, shoulders tight, hands locked at the top of the wheel. His jaw looked clenched, the muscles standing out under the skin. He did not look at us. He did not check his mirrors. He stared straight down the road as if he was bracing for something. I told myself it was coincidence. The highway had exits and on-ramps that looped back. Maybe he had missed one. Maybe he was just driving badly. The music kept playing. The road kept unrolling. When he passed the fourth time, the energy in the car changed. No one laughed. No one moved much. The sedan came up slower this time. As it drew level, I forced myself to look again. The driver's posture was the same. Rigid. Focused. There was sweat on his temple, visible even in the brief wash of headlights. His lips were pressed together so tightly they looked pale. He did not glance over. He did not acknowledge us at all. That made it worse. It felt deliberate. My foot eased off the gas. The distance between us stretched, then shrank. The sedan slowed too, matching us without signaling, hovering just ahead. The music felt wrong suddenly. Too loud, too careless. I reached over and turned it down without looking. The fifth time never became a pass. The sedan pulled up beside us and stayed there. Same speed, same lane. The road ahead was empty. The median to our left was wide and dark, a shallow dip filled with grass and scrub, broken by concrete drainage cuts that vanished into shadow. There was no reason for him to be there, pacing us, holding that position. I stared forward, neck stiff, hands tight now on the wheel. My peripheral vision kept pulling toward him. The sense of being watched pressed against my skin even before he turned. When he did, it was slow. His head pivoted, chin lifting slightly, eyes finding us with precision. His face changed as he looked over. The tension did not leave him. It sharpened into something else. He smiled. It was not friendly. It was not playful. It was not a threat meant to scare. It was relief. The expression of someone who had been searching and had finally succeeded. The corners of his mouth pulled back, but his eyes stayed hard and wet, focused on us with an intensity that made my stomach drop. His shoulders loosened a fraction, like he could finally stop holding something in. One of my friends screamed. It cut through the car, sharp and panicked, and then there was nothing else. No words, no movement except my own breath hitching in my chest. The sedan stayed beside us for another second, maybe two. Long enough for the image of his face to burn in. Long enough for me to register a smear of something dark on his knuckles where they gripped the wheel. Long enough for my foot to hesitate between braking and accelerating. Then he turned the wheel hard to the left. The sedan veered into the median at speed and vanished. There was no sound of impact, no crunch of metal, no burst of sparks. The grass swallowed the headlights, and then there was only darkness where the car had been. The road ahead stayed empty. The oncoming lanes stayed clear. Nothing came back up. I slowed without meaning to, scanning the median, waiting for debris, for smoke, for anything that would explain where a moving car had gone. The grass rolled away into shadow. The concrete cuts yawned black and silent. The night absorbed everything. No one spoke. The silence felt heavy, pressing against the windows. The music stayed off. My heart hammered hard enough to make my hands shake on the wheel. I drove the rest of the way home below the speed limit, eyes locked on the road, mirrors checked too often. Every set of headlights behind us made my shoulders tense. Every dark shape near the shoulder pulled my focus. The highway signs felt farther apart than they should have been. Time stretched. When we finally reached the outskirts of town, the familiar lights did nothing to ease the feeling. I dropped my friends off without stopping the engine for long. The goodbyes were fast and clumsy, movements stiff, eyes darting. When I was alone, the car felt too quiet, too small. I slept poorly. The image of the man's face replayed whenever I closed my eyes. The relief in that smile made my skin crawl in a way fear alone never had. The explanation came later, not all at once, but in pieces that fit together whether I wanted them to or not. A week after the concert, a short article ran in the local paper about a hit-and-run investigation connected to a series of highway incidents. A man had been arrested after crashing his car into a drainage access road in the median of the same stretch of highway we had driven that night. He survived. The article mentioned that the access roads were unmarked, built for maintenance crews, sloping down steeply before curving under the highway through concrete culverts. From the road, they looked like nothing. In the dark, they were invisible. The man had been reported earlier that night for aggressive driving and for following a vehicle for several miles. The description of his car matched. The damage listed matched the scrape I had noticed on his bumper. The part that locked everything into place was a later update. The man had been looking for someone. Earlier that evening, he had been involved in a violent incident at a gas station off the highway. Witnesses described him chasing another car after mistaking the occupants for the people who had intervened and gotten his license plate. He believed they were trying to follow him. He believed they were trying to report him. He had been circling the highway, passing and repassing, trying to confirm what he thought he saw. When he pulled alongside us and looked over, he thought he had found the right car. The smile was relief because, in his mind, the search was over. When he veered into the median, it was not to disappear into nothing. He took the access road at speed, lost control on the gravel slope, and slammed into the culvert wall. No explosion, no fire, just a sudden, silent drop out of sight. I drove that stretch of highway again during the day. I found the access road. From the lane, it blended perfectly into the grass. Without knowing it was there, without daylight, without a reason to look for it, it might as well not have existed. Understanding what happened did not make it easier. It made it worse in a different way. There was no mystery left to soften the memory. No unknown to blame. Just a man, angry and scared, locking onto the wrong people and smiling because he thought he had found what he was looking for. I still see his face sometimes when a car paces me on the highway. I still check the median without thinking. The road looks the same. The access roads are still there. The night still hides them. I was hauling equipment alone. Long drive. No sleep. That is what I told myself later, and what I still say when the memory comes back too sharp. The job had me moving survey gear between sites that were days apart by road. The company saved money by running one truck instead of two, and I had been the one who did not complain when they asked who could handle it solo. I liked being alone. I liked the quiet of highways at night, the steady hum of tires, the sense that nothing existed outside the beam of the headlights. That night started the same way. I left before sunset and drove until the sky went flat and black. The cab smelled like dust, old coffee, and the rubber of tie-down straps warming from the engine heat. The radio barely worked, so I drove with it off, listening to the truck instead. The road cut through scrubland that turned into low forest. No towns, no houses, just long stretches where the pavement narrowed and the lines faded. I had been awake for almost 30 hours by then. My eyes burned, but my body felt wired and numb at the same time. I kept the window cracked for cold air and told myself I was fine. I counted miles between reflective posts. I watched for deer because hitting one would end the trip and maybe me with it. The headlights caught something moving ahead, not far, just at the edge of the beam. At first it registered as a shadow that did not belong to the trees. I eased off the gas without thinking. The shape stepped into the road, and my mind reached for something familiar to label it before it made sense. It was tall, taller than any animal I had seen cross a road out there. It moved on two legs, not stiff, not clumsy, but balanced, the way a person moves when they are used to rough ground. The stride was long, the shoulders were high, the head sat low between them. For a second it was fully lit, and I saw the outline clean and sharp against the pavement. Then it dropped. The motion was smooth, fast, like a hinge releasing. Two legs folded forward and down, weight shifting in one continuous movement. It landed on all fours without a stumble and ran off the road into the brush. The plants shook and bent as it went through them, not crashing, just parting and snapping back. The whole thing lasted less than 2 seconds. I did not brake hard. I did not swerve. My hands tightened on the wheel and stayed there. My foot hovered over the brake, but did not press. The truck rolled through the place where it had been standing. The headlights swept over empty pavement and then trees again. My first thought was exhaustion. That kind of tired where your brain fills in gaps wrong. I told myself it was a deer rearing up for some reason, though I had never seen one do that. I told myself it was a trick of light, a shadow lining up with branches. I told myself anything that would let me keep driving. But none of those explanations fit the way it moved. Deer bolt. They flinch. They stumble when they spook. Bears can stand, but they do not cross a road upright at that speed. People do not drop and run like that. Not in the dark, not without shoes, not into that brush. I checked the mirrors even though I knew it was gone. My heart rate stayed high, not panic, just a steady hammer that would not slow. The road ahead looked the same as it had before, but it felt different, like the space had weight now. I watched the shoulders too closely. Every bush seemed ready to step out. I did not stop. I did not back up. I did not radio it in. There was no signal anyway, and I did not want to say the words out loud, even to myself. I drove another 3 hours before dawn, stiff and alert, jumping at nothing. When I reached the yard, I parked and sat for a long time before turning the engine off. When I finally slept, it was light outside. I finished the contract. I loaded and unloaded. I drove the routes I was assigned. I did not tell anyone what I saw. I told myself that if I could not explain it cleanly, it did not deserve space. 3 weeks later, I quit. I said it was the hours. I said it was the pay. Both were true, but not the reason that mattered. The image stayed. Not the fear, but the detail. The way the joints moved. The length of the arms once it was on all fours. The absence of hesitation. Those things do not fade when you invent them. They fade when you misremember. This stayed sharp. Months later, I was reading an incident report online about a bear attack 2 counties over. The article mentioned an adult male black bear with severe mange. The photos showed patchy skin, elongated limbs, a narrow head without the usual fur to soften it. The description talked about unusual movement patterns due to pain and muscle loss, about the animal spending more time upright because it was easier on the joints, about it moving closer to roads at night because it had learned they meant food. I looked up more. Wildlife reports, studies, videos. I found footage of bears standing, walking short distances on 2 legs when injured or conditioned. I watched clips of them dropping and running when startled. The motion was not exact, but it was close enough that my stomach tightened the same way it had that night. The area I had been driving through fell within the range mentioned in one of the reports. The timing lined up. Late summer, dry conditions, increased road crossings after dark. That explanation settled something in me. It did not make the memory less disturbing, but it gave it edges. It fit the speed, the size, the silence. It explained why the movement looked wrong for anything I expected to see. It explained why my brain rejected it at first. I still do not drive at night if I can help it. That choice is not about fear of an animal. It is about trust. I learned how thin the line is between what you think you know and what actually exists just beyond your headlights. I learned how quickly exhaustion strips context away and leaves you with raw motion and shape. I did not encounter anything else on that drive. Nothing followed me. Nothing waited ahead. The road stayed empty. The job ended. Life moved on. But the fact remains that something real crossed in front of me, something that did not match my expectations, something my mind could not file away in time. That is enough. I was driving back from the hospice after sitting beside my grandmother's bed for hours, watching her breathe in short, uneven pulls that sounded like fabric tearing very slowly. The room smelled like disinfectant and wilted flowers. I had held her hand until it felt like holding a bird's bones under skin. When I finally left, it was dark enough that the parking lot lights made everything else disappear. I remember starting the engine. After that, the drive broke apart in my head. The road home ran through long stretches of farmland and wooded patches where the trees leaned close to the asphalt. It was the kind of road people speed on during the day and avoid at night. I had driven it my whole life, yet that night it felt unfamiliar, like a place copied badly from memory. My thoughts kept circling back to the hospice room. The way my grandmother's eyes stayed closed even when I spoke. The way the nurse touched my shoulder before I left. gentle and practiced, as if she already knew what morning would bring. I barely registered the miles passing. I noticed the speedometer once, then not again. The radio stayed off. I wanted the quiet, but the quiet made my thoughts louder. I kept seeing my grandmother's chest rising and falling, measuring time in seconds without meaning to. I missed a turn I had never missed before and had to correct myself. My hands felt heavy on the wheel, like they belonged to someone else. That was when I saw the hazard lights. They flashed ahead in the dark, steady and amber, half swallowed by a shallow ditch on the right side of the road. The car sat at an angle, nose down, back wheels still on the shoulder. There were no houses nearby, no streetlights, no other cars. The road curved just enough that the lights appeared suddenly, forcing me to slow down fast. I remember feeling annoyed first, then alert. I checked my mirrors, out of habit more than caution, and pulled over ahead of the car. I do not think I decided to stop in any thoughtful way. It felt automatic, like braking for a red light. I had a gas can in the trunk because my grandmother lived far enough out that running out would mean walking miles. I told myself the man probably misjudged his fuel, that it happened to people all the time, that I would pour some gas and be gone in minutes. When I got out, the air felt colder than it had a moment earlier. The road smelled faintly of damp soil and cut grass. The man stood near the driver's side door, not waving, not pacing. He was still, facing me, hands at his sides. His clothes looked ordinary. Dark jacket, jeans, boots. His face held no clear emotion. He watched me the way someone watches a machine they do not fully trust. I popped my trunk and lifted the gas can. The metal felt colder than it should have. As I walked closer to his car, small details began to stand out. The hazard lights blinked without sound. No ticking, no hum. The car itself looked untouched. No dirt on the tires, no mud on the sides. The ditch it sat in was shallow but wet from recent rain, yet the paint showed no streaks, no splash marks. When I passed the rear bumper, I noticed there was no license plate. Not a bent one, not a temporary tag, nothing at all. The space where it should have been was clean. I told myself he might have removed it. I told myself people did strange things. I set the gas can down and twisted off the cap. The smell of gasoline cut through the night, sharp and heavy. I remember thinking the smell was grounding, something solid and real. As I poured, my hands shook. I tried to steady them by focusing on the sound of liquid hitting metal, but the sound felt muted, like it was being swallowed by the open air. The man did not help. He did not look away. He watched the gas flow as if it were unfamiliar, his head tilted slightly, eyes fixed on my hands. The look made my skin crawl, not because it was aggressive, but because it was blank. There was no impatience, no gratitude, no concern, just observation. When the can emptied enough, I stopped and wiped my hands on my jacket. Gasoline soaked through the fabric, cold against my skin. I screwed the cap back on and lifted the can. The man reached for it, and when our hands nearly touched, I felt a wave of unease that had nothing to do with fear of crime. It felt more like stepping into a room where something bad had already happened and not knowing why you knew that. He said something then. His voice was calm and low. He did not raise it. He did not sound threatening. The words were clear enough that I heard them despite the rush in my ears. He told me that stopping for people like him was a bad idea. He did not smile when he said it. He did not warn me in a friendly way. It sounded like a statement of fact, like telling someone the weather would turn. I did not respond. I did not thank him. I did not ask questions. I nodded once, more to end the moment than to agree, and backed away. I walked faster than necessary to my car. My hands fumbled with the door handle. When I got inside, I locked the doors immediately, the click loud in the quiet. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. I started the engine and pulled back onto the road without checking the ditch again. I drove faster than I should have. The road stretched ahead in a narrow tunnel of headlights. My thoughts scattered. I kept replaying the scene, trying to pin down what had unsettled me so deeply. It was not the lack of a license plate alone. It was not the way he watched me. It was the timing, the way my emotions had already been stripped raw by the hospice, leaving nothing between me and whatever that moment was. After a few miles, I forced myself to slow down. My hands were cramped from gripping the wheel. I told myself I was safe now. I told myself the man was just someone strange on a dark road, and that my state of mind had turned him into something larger than he was. Still, I checked my rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty. No hazard lights. No headlights pulling out. I slowed almost to a stop, craning my neck to see back along the curve. The ditch where the car had been was visible for a brief moment in my headlights. It was empty. No tire tracks. No car angled into the grass. Nothing disturbed the edge of the road. I pulled over again, heart pounding, and sat there with the engine running. I scanned both sides of the road. I stepped out and walked back a short distance, my phone light cutting through the dark. The ditch showed signs of recent rain, flattened grass, but no impression of a vehicle. No oil stains. No debris. The road itself was clean. I got back into my car and drove the rest of the way home without stopping. I did not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the blinking lights and the man's face, expressionless, watching. When my phone rang early in the morning, I knew what it would be before I answered. My grandmother had died quietly a few hours after I left the hospice. In the days that followed, I tried to understand why the memory of that night stayed lodged in me so deeply. I did not tell anyone at first. It felt wrong to mix it with the grief, as if speaking it would cheapen both. When I finally did talk about it, I kept my voice steady, kept my explanations practical. I said the man must have driven off quickly. I said I might have stopped in the wrong place when I looked back. I said stress does strange things to perception. Those explanations made sense on the surface. Cars can pull out of ditches fast. Memory can blur locations, especially at night. Grief can sharpen small moments until they cut. Over time, I accepted that the car was real, the man was real, and the disappearance was a combination of timing and my fractured attention. There was no need for anything beyond that. What stayed with me was not the mystery, but the feeling of the encounter lining up with the moment my grandmother's life was ending. I had been emptied out by hours of waiting and watching. I had stopped functioning on instinct alone. In that state, I had crossed paths with someone who saw me clearly enough to know I should not have been there, offering help without thinking. His words were not a threat. They were a mirror held up at the worst possible time. I understand now that the connection I felt was not about fate or signs. It was about vulnerability. I had been open in a way I rarely allow, worn thin by love and loss. That night taught me how exposed grief can make a person, how easily it can pull you into situations you would normally avoid. The road, the man, the empty ditch all merged into a lesson learned at a cost. I still drive that road. I still pass the place where I believe I stopped. Nothing marks it. No memorial. No scar in the earth. When I think of my grandmother, I think of her hands and her breath, not the man by the ditch. But sometimes, when I am tired or distracted, I remember his calm voice stating a simple truth, and I slow down, stay in my car, and keep going. My phone rang a little after 2 in the morning, cutting through a shallow sleep. I remember the vibration more than the sound, the way it seemed to travel through the mattress and into my chest. I reached for it without checking the time. My sister's name was on the screen. She was crying hard enough that it came through the phone in broken bursts, sharp breaths, and wet, panicked sounds that didn't need explanation. Her ex had shown up at her apartment again. Not yelling, not breaking anything. Just standing there, knocking, waiting. She wanted her spare keys back, immediately. She didn't feel safe staying there another minute. I told myself it was nothing serious, that it was just another late-night scare, another mess left behind by someone who refused to let go. I pulled on sweatpants and a hoodie without turning on the lights, grabbed my car keys, and left my apartment half awake. The air outside was cold enough to sting. The parking lot was empty, the kind of empty that made every sound feel louder than it should have been. My car started on the first try. I took that as a good sign, even though it meant nothing. The drive to her place was quiet. Too quiet. The streets were almost empty, and the traffic lights felt slow and heavy, switching colors with no urgency. My mind kept drifting back to the sound of her breathing on the phone. I kept replaying it, trying to measure how scared she had really been. I told myself she was overreacting. I told myself I was doing the right thing by not calling the police, by handling it quickly and getting home. I wanted this to be finished before the sun came up. I got to her apartment complex without seeing anything unusual. No strange cars. No one standing outside. I parked close to her building and walked fast, my keys threaded between my fingers out of habit. The hallway smelled like old carpet and cleaning spray. Her door was closed. I knocked once, and she opened it immediately, her face swollen from crying, her eyes red and unfocused. She handed me the spare keys without speaking. I stepped inside just long enough to make sure she was alone, then left. The whole exchange took less than a minute. I told her to lock the door behind me and to call if anything changed. I didn't wait for a response. By the time I got back into my car, my adrenaline had already started to fade. The exhaustion rushed in to replace it. I pulled out of the lot and headed back toward the main road, thinking about my bed, about sleep, about how stupid it felt to be shaken by something so small. A few minutes later, I noticed headlights behind me. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Late night, driving meant long stretches of empty road broken by the occasional car heading the same direction. Then the high beams flashed. Not the quick burst people use when they're annoyed or trying to pass. The flashes came in uneven intervals. One long flash, then a pause, then two short ones. It didn't feel accidental. I adjusted my rearview mirror. The car stayed at a steady distance, not gaining, not falling back. Another flash came, then another, each one deliberate. My shoulders tightened. I told myself the driver was distracted, maybe playing with the lights without realizing it. I kept driving at the same speed. At the next intersection, instead of continuing straight, I turned onto a residential street. It was narrow and lined with parked cars and dark houses. The streetlights were spaced far apart, leaving long shadows between them. I watched the mirror as I turned. The car followed without hesitation. My heart rate picked up, sharp and fast. I slowed down, easing off the gas until I was barely moving. The speedometer dropped to a crawl that made no sense for the road. The car behind me matched it exactly. The distance stayed the same. The high beams stopped flashing, but the headlights stayed bright, filling my mirrors and washing out everything behind them. I approached a stop sign and came to a full stop. The street was silent. No wind, no movement, nothing. The other car rolled up beside me instead of stopping behind. The engine sounded smooth, controlled. I turned my head without meaning to. The driver was already looking at me. His smile was wide and fixed, stretching his mouth farther than it should have gone. His eyes were open too wide, unblinking, locked onto my face. There was no confusion in his expression, no hesitation. He lifted his hand and tapped the passenger seat of his car with 2 fingers, slow and clear, the gesture unmistakable. He wanted me to pull over. He wanted me to get out. Every instinct in my body screamed at once. My foot slammed down on the gas. I ran the stop sign without looking, tires chirping as I shot forward. The other car lurched after me, engine roaring as it straightened out and followed. I took the next turn without signaling, then another, cutting through side streets I barely knew. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. I could feel my pulse in my throat, in my ears. I checked the mirror constantly, half expecting the car to vanish, half expecting it to be right on my bumper. It stayed with me for 3 blocks, close enough that I could see the outline of the driver's head, the glow of his dashboard. Then, without warning, the car swerved hard into a driveway. The headlights shut off instantly, plunging the street behind me into darkness. I slowed without meaning to, my body reacting before my mind caught up. I looked in the mirror and saw him step out of the car. He stood at the edge of the driveway, still facing me. The street light above him flickered, then steadied, revealing his smile again. In his hand was something long and metallic. It caught the light and reflected it back in a thin, sharp line. He didn't move toward me. He didn't raise it. He just stood there, watching, smiling, as if he had all the time in the world. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down again. I kept driving until the streets blurred together and my hands started to ache from gripping the wheel too hard. I didn't go straight home. I circled through different neighborhoods, doubling back, making random turns, watching my mirrors until my eyes burned. When I finally pulled into my parking lot, the sky was starting to lighten at the edges. I sat in my car for a long time before getting out. My legs felt weak when I stood. Every sound made me turn my head. I locked my door, then checked it twice, then a third time. Sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the smile, the tapping fingers, the flash of metal under the streetlight. The next morning, I drove back to my sister's place in daylight. She looked calmer, but tired in a deeper way. We talked through logistics instead of feelings. She stayed with a friend that night. A week later, she moved to a different part of the city, a place with controlled access and cameras that actually worked. She changed her number. She stopped going anywhere alone after dark. I never saw the car again. No reports came up. No one I spoke to had noticed anything strange that night. The streets looked normal in daylight, harmless, almost boring. Still, I replay the drive in my head more than I should. I think about how the high beams flashed before I ever turned off the main road. I think about the timing, about how quiet everything had been. I don't know if he followed me because of my sister, if he had seen me at her apartment, if he thought I was connected to her in some way. I don't know if I was just the first person alone on an empty street at the wrong time. What I do know is how easily it happened, how quickly a normal night turned into something else. I still check my mirrors more than I need to. I still avoid that neighborhood. Some nights, when the streets are empty and the lights feel too far apart, I remember the way he stood there, smiling, as if the choice had always been his. I was driving because my dad had called me drunk and stranded at a VFW hall 2 towns over. I did not want to go. I had work early. The night was already heavy, and I knew the kind of mess that waited when he drank too much. I went anyway because leaving him there would have meant a longer problem in the morning. County Road 12 was the shortest route. People avoided it after dark. It cut through 10 miles of open farmland with no houses, no businesses, and no cell service. During the day, it looked harmless, just a straight ribbon of asphalt between fields. At night, it felt abandoned, like a road left behind by mistake. The turn onto County Road 12 was easy to miss. The pavement narrowed, the shoulder dropped off into gravel, and the darkness changed texture. The headlights stopped bouncing off mailboxes and reflectors and instead sank into empty distance. Cornfields lined both sides, tall and unmoving. There was no wind. The sky was clear, but the stars felt far away, pinned to something unreachable. My car sounded loud inside that space. Every hum and click felt amplified. About halfway through the stretch, I noticed headlights behind me. They appeared in my rearview mirror as a steady white pair, clean and centered. That alone meant nothing. Cars used the road sometimes. The strange part came with time. The lights stayed the same size. They did not drift closer. They did not fade back. Mile after mile passed, and the distance never changed. No passing attempt, no hesitation, just the same measured gap, like the car behind me was tethered. I slowed down to 40. The speedometer needle dropped, the engine softened, and my headlights carved a shorter tunnel through the road. The lights behind me matched it without delay. I sped up to 70. The engine climbed, the road markings blurred, and the mirrors still showed the same spacing. The timing felt too precise. No one drives like that by accident on an empty road. I checked my mirrors again, expecting to see a pickup riding high or a farm truck loaded with something heavy. The lights were too low and too evenly spaced for a truck. They were not bright enough for modern headlights, but not dull either. They were steady, with no bounce, no sway. The road was flat, but even flat roads cause some movement. These lights looked fixed. My radio crackled without warning. Music dropped out and static rushed in, sharp and dry. Through it came a sound that made my hands tighten on the wheel. It was breathing, slow and uneven, with a pause between each pull of air. It was too regular to be random noise. The rhythm stayed consistent, like someone matching their breath to a pattern. I reached out and turned the radio off. The cabin fell silent except for the engine and tires. The headlights behind me shut off at the same moment. They did not dim or drift away. They were simply gone. The mirror showed nothing but dark road. I eased off the gas and pulled onto the shoulder. Gravel crunched under the tires. My pulse was loud in my ears. I waited for the car to pass, for the rush of air and sound that comes when headlights close in. Nothing came. The road behind me stayed empty. The darkness felt dense, like it had weight. It pressed in on the car from every side. The fields no longer felt open. They felt occupied, not by something visible, but by the idea of something being there. I picked up my phone. No service. The screen glowed too bright in the car, lighting my hands and steering wheel in pale blue. I set it in the cup holder and looked forward again. The road ahead was unchanged, straight and narrow, disappearing into black. When I put the car back into gear, the GPS screen flickered. The map stuttered and rotated, then rerouted me onto a thin line branching off the main road. It showed a farm access road I had never seen before. No name, no details, just a thin path cutting through the fields. I knew that road was not there. I had driven this stretch before in daylight. There was nothing but fences and drainage ditches. I ignored the reroute and stayed on County Road 12. The GPS continued to pulse, trying to pull me off the route. I shut it off as well. The silence returned, deeper this time. The sense of being followed did not return, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Every reflective marker on the side of the road looked like an eye for a split second before resolving into plastic. I drove the rest of the way without stopping. The last miles passed slowly, marked by a distant glow that meant town. When I reached the VFW hall, my dad was outside, sitting on the curb. He was embarrassed more than drunk by then. The building was quiet, lights dimmed, the parking lot mostly empty. I got him into the car and drove him home. The next morning, after sleep dulled the edge of the night, I told him what happened. I expected a shrug or a joke. Instead, his face tightened in a way I recognized from old memories. The look he got when something hit close to a buried concern. He told me that County Road 12 had been rerouted in the 90s. The original stretch cut through the same fields, but followed a slightly different line. According to him, the county moved it after a string of crashes that made no sense on a straight, flat road. Drivers swore they saw something step into the road at night. Not an animal, not clearly a person, just a shape that caused them to brake or swerve. The accidents clustered in one section, always after dark, always without skid marks that matched the damage. The official reports blamed fatigue, alcohol, or livestock. The road was shifted a few hundred yards east, and the old access paths were left behind for farm equipment. Most of them were never removed from maps. Later, I looked into it myself. The radio interference made sense. Old farm equipment uses frequencies that bleed into car radios, especially at night when the air carries sound differently. Breathing could have been the rhythm of a compressor or irrigation pump cycling on and off in the fields. Headlights matching speed could have been a tractor or combine moving along a parallel access road, pacing me without meaning to. When it turned away into a field, the lights would have vanished all at once. The GPS reroute fit too. Outdated mapping software sometimes prefers those access roads, especially where the main road was altered years ago. What stayed with me was not the explanation, but the timing. The breathing stopped when I turned the radio off. The lights disappeared at the same instant. The road felt wrong in a way that did not rely on fear of the unknown, but on recognition of danger without a clear source. People crashing into something they could not identify did not require anything supernatural. Fatigue, darkness, and expectation fill in gaps fast. A shadow at the edge of the headlights becomes a reason to react. County Road 12 still exists, but I do not use it at night anymore. Not because I think something lives there, but because I understand how easily a mind can be pushed by isolation and pattern. A straight road with no reference points makes speed and distance unreliable. Lights can lie. Sound can mislead. The body reacts before logic catches up. Whatever those drivers swerved for in the 90s was likely ordinary, misplaced by fear into something else. That night taught me how thin the line is between control and panic. Nothing chased me. Nothing touched my car. Nothing followed me home. Every part of it had a reasonable cause. The danger was never a creature in the road. It was the moment when perception stopped being trustworthy, and the instinct to react could have put me into a ditch just as easily as anyone before me.